Hello and welcome to this, our 80-second live stream. The censors are coming for you. We did have a few technical difficulties starting this out. YouTube decided not to do the normal playback, but we determined that it was just a YouTube issue, not anything having to do with the stream itself. So I think we're good here. Okay, so it's not on our end, it's on YouTube's end, but it seems to be fine. Anyway, the theme of tonight's video is about censorship. For those of you who don't know, last week my debate between myself and Titus Kennedy was deleted off of Sean McDowell's channel. And he did not notify me before this. He posted on his community tab a day after the fact, and then he sent me an email 2 days after that. And the explanations have been just sort of less than plausible. So, let's just say people have been rather agitated at the fact that I have my own copy of this debate. And that's going to be posted with my commentary on Monday. And then on Wednesday, I'm just going to release the raw video without commentary so that people can see it without any sort of contextualization. So, as always, I will leave the final judgment to you, the viewers. Some people thought the debate was really lopsided against Kennedy. Some people thought I was being mean and condescending and rude. I'll leave that decision to you. Okay, that's your decision. That's your call. Yeah, so we're going to let you watch it and make up your own mind. And we'll see, how did this... the reason we were given why the video was taken down was because it wasn't charitable and it has tested at two criteria to be taken down. Not charitable, not substantive. Means without substance. So we'll let you decide whether or not it has no substance at all. So, anyway, we're going to get into the questions now, and the rules are the same as always, which is that...
Monday?
Oh, my producer reminded me, I've got 2 interviews coming up on Monday as well. Monday's going to be very, very busy. I've got a interview with Cameron Bertuzzi of Capturing Christianity in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I have a interview with S.J. Thomason on her channel. So this is, and both of them want to talk about this whole Exodus censoring incident. So I think that this should be a learning experience for everyone. But we hope you will join us on Monday. We're going to play the debate with my commentary on Monday at 8 p.m. Okay, that's important point. It's going to be at 8 p.m. And we're going to do it as a premiere. So I'm going to be on the live chat there with you guys watching it. And it is going to run about 3 hours with all my commentary. So, get your popcorn, get your sodas, and be prepared for quite a long experience here. And we're going to unfold the whole thing. So anyway, let's get to the questions. The rules are the same as always, which is super chats have priority. We do also take non-super chat questions, and we ask that you put a Q and a colon in front of your question so I know that's directed to me. Also, if it has to, we also ask that you only post your question once. And finally, if it has to do with a Bible verse or a foreign language, please give me some context. In the case of a Bible verse, give me the chapter, book, chapter, and verse. In the case of the foreign language, word in foreign language, please give me what language you think it's in and what you think it means. This gives me enough context to make really kind of decide here. Okay? So with that said, let's get into the questions. What's the takeaway? 4 hours cut with commentary. Well, only 2 hours and 45 minutes, but that's long enough, I assure you. So, okay, let's get into the questions here. Okay, our first question is 501 Mobius. And he asks, what genealogy was Titus talking about? There is a 1 Chronicles 6, 33, 37, 17 generations genealogy, but also a 1 Chronicles 6, 4 to 10, 14 generation one. At 20 years of generation, 14 seems okay. Okay. The early date of the Exodus are early date proponents for the Exodus really are talking about the 1 Chronicles 6, 33 to 37. And that is because there are 18 generations between Haman the singer and Korah. And Haman is contemporary with King David, so they figure one more generation for Solomon. That gets you 19 generations. 19 times 25 gets them close to that 1440 mark, 1446 Exodus mark. Okay? Now, of course, that's not a real generation, a genealogy. That's an honorary genealogy. It's a spliced genealogy. The last 8 generations from Zuph to Haman are really copied from 1 Samuel 1:1, which is the genealogy of Samuel. And this genealogy is, it's super fascinating because 1 Samuel 1:1 really tells you what is the pedigree of Samuel. He's an Ephraimite from the land of Ephraim. So there's no question about what his pedigree is. The whole matter here, though, is that Samuel was promised, that he would receive blessing from the Lord, through his posterity. And because the Lord had selected him to, fill in the gap, while no qualified Levite could serve in the tabernacle, God honored his service, his long-suffering service, by allowing his posterity to serve in the temple as honorary Levites. Now, they didn't give you a certificate back then saying, you are an honorary Levite. What they did was they grafted your genealogy into the Levitical genealogy to sort of provide this, basically, God's blessing on this through this sort of, religious fiction is probably the best way to put it, but it's really a way of showing an honor. Okay, it's kind of like when you, if you're recognized by, say, a Navajo tribe, they might make you an honorary Navajo. You're not really from the line of the Navajo, but they've made you an honorary member of the tribe. This is the same deal. The posterity of Samuel is being made honorary Levites, even though they're not. So anyway, that's what's going on in that pericope. They are focused on the 1 Chronicles 6, 33 to 37, and that's because they think it'll get them to 1446. And it really doesn't. Actually, I am going to take this non-directed question for the moment because it's an interesting one too. Sean Horton said, "Is this how honorary degrees work too?" Sort of. Think of an honorary degree as kind of king for a day. You're not really a doctor in the sense that you haven't done a doctorate, but an honorary degree is basically to honor you with basically that you've got some sort of extra accomplishment, or if we're more jaded about this, you gave a whole lot of money to the university. Um, so you're being honored as a doctor for a day. Okay. So it's not a real doctorate. It's a honor. You're being honored as if you were a doctor. So that's how honorary doctorates work. Unfortunately, there are people inside the church that think an honorary doctorate is a real doctorate, and it really isn't. So that's really what's happening there. It's a matter of honor and respect, but it's everyone sort of knows that this is a sort of a fiction, as it were. You're not really a doctorate. Okay. So I want to thank you for that question. Good question. We're on to the next one here. Dark Blades. Thoughts on the announcement earlier this year that linear Elamite has been deciphered? I think this is really awesome. Okay, I'm going to be straight up with you. If we start getting text that we can decipher out of Elam, boy, that opens up a whole lot of stuff for chronology. And for me, I'm all into the chronology. So, we've got a lot of linear Elamite texts, a lot of them, but we haven't been able to decipher them because we didn't have until people weren't able to piece together because we didn't have a similar Rosetta Stone for them. Now we have a few texts that are sort of vaguely similar, and basically a team of people from various institutions have been working on this problem. So that's the other thing too, is that the work that's been done on linear Elamite has not been done in isolation. It's not one guy trying to figure this out. Several schools have been cooperating to try to figure this out. I think this is absolutely fantastic if it pans out. Now, it might not pan out. It could be that they've gotten together and sort of just, fudge the data. That happens sometimes. But if this does work out, this is really, really important. This is going to be really important to understand our understanding of the ancient Near East. So, I'm very excited about this. I have the paper. I haven't gone through it yet. I still need to. I really want to sort of take my time to go through it and parse it and see if I can take some of their texts and basically read it using this. So if this works out, it's going to be fabulous. Fantastic. It's going to fill in a lot of dark portions of Elam. And Elam is an important kingdom. It's a really, really important kingdom. It was a key rival to Mari. It was an important empire at one point. And it's been important for a long period of time. Back from the first dynasty of Babylon, through hundreds of years. So, absolutely, this is a very important discovery if it pans out. So, yeah, very excited about this. I'm looking forward to actually getting into this one a bit deeper. So, anyway, thank you for the question. Very much appreciated. Our next one here, from Penniless Theologian. Another question on Judges 11. Was there a way for Jephthah? Some suggest Leviticus 2:8 as an option. Leviticus 5:4-6 mentions a sin offering for a rash oath. seems to fit with the theme of Jephthah's ignorance. Yes, it does, and that is part of the point. Now, Leviticus 27, 2-8 suggests that if someone's taken a rash oath that may involve their life, they can redeem the life for a certain amount of cash. For a male between, I think it was 28 to 50, it's like 50 shekels, and lesser amounts for, say, women and children. Okay. Now, the fact that it's lesser amounts is not unusual. I mean, insurance actuaries still do this today. You know, a guy who's working in, say, high finance is going to be insured for more than, say, a housewife or a child. So, you know, that's not an uncommon thing, even for us. And Leviticus 5, 4-6 does have an exit strategy for someone who's made a rash oath. So, absolutely, I think these were possible outs for, and Leviticus 5, you know, part of that sin offering was the sacrifice of an animal. So, yes, I definitely think that these were potential outs for Jephthah. But he was incredibly ignorant. It looks like his whole village was ignorant. You know, I think that this is one of those incidents where the teachings of the father not being passed to the sons really sort of bore bad fruit. So they took on the cultures, the customs of the region, not the law as was given to Moses. So, absolutely, I think this is a great. These are great examples of, say, a thematic parallel here, where, you know, Jephthah's not a good judge. He's not a knowledgeable judge. He's not a holy judge. He doesn't know his Torah. And I think this is because he doesn't know his Torah. This is what's the result of it. So, I want to thank you for the question. Very much appreciated. And then finally, our first non-super chat of the beginning of the night comes from Tim Yara. And he says, I think some of us are still waiting for a comment on the deuterocanonical parts of the Book of Daniel, the Hymn of the Three Youths. Okay, I have actually finally had the time to look at this. I do not think it is part of the original Book of Daniel. Okay. It does not appear in any of the Masoretic texts, Dead Sea Scrolls. It only appears in some parts of the Septuagint. So it does. That doesn't mean it's not. It doesn't mean it's recent. But it does mean it's probably part. It's an apocryphal addition to the Book of Daniel. So, I don't regard it, because of that sort of textual context for the Hymn of the Three Youths. I wouldn't regard it as scripture, but it does seem to fit with Apocrypha. I know some denominations do regard Apocrypha as scripture. I personally don't. Okay. So with that said, I just don't think the textual evidence is there to say support it as a part of the original Daniel. It does seem to be a later addition. So, there's not a whole lot more I can say about that. It is a poetic section. It is a piece of poetry that has been added. We don't have any, as I say, we have no Hebrew attestation of this at all. That doesn't mean it wasn't written in Hebrew. It just means it doesn't seem to have been part of the literary tradition that we find in Judea. So not in the Masoretic text, not in any of the recessions of Daniel that we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I think that's so. This could have been part of the apocryphal tradition that was, say, found in Egypt, where the Septuagint was being translated. So that's sort of my take on this. But I have, as I said, I have finally looked at this, and that's sort of the conclusion I've come to on it. So anyway, I want to thank you for the question. I'm sorry it took like 4 or 5 weeks for me to get to it, but that seemed to be. It's been a busy 2 months. What can I say? It's been very busy. I mean, I still haven't even gotten over my whole bronchitis that I caught 8 weeks ago, before the debate. So it's just like this is just it's been running me ragged, this whole thing. But I got to it, and I hope that helped. Thank you very much for the question. I very much appreciate it. Okay, we're finally on to super chats. Our first super chat is from the Camilla Pard for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Shalom. Heard an interesting theory. Do you think John the Immerser would have been an Essene? Ooh. That is highly debated. Really highly debated. He was the son of a Levite. He was the son of a Levite. His father was a Levite, and therefore he was a Levite. So he's the son of a Levite. But does that necessarily make him an Essene? Chances are not. Now, we don't know a lot about the Essene sect, and that's part of what the whole murkiness is in all this. There's some controversy, and a lot of controversy, over whether or not the Essenes really were a sect. We have one sort of tangential reference to the Essenes, and I believe it's from Josephus. But that's about all we have. It's been assumed that the ritual site at Qumran was basically an Essene sanctuary, monastery, however you want to put that. But I'm not exactly convinced of that, to be honest. I'm kind of leaning towards the view now that Qumran was essentially a manuscript production house. Now, one of the things we know from the first century is that private copies of scriptures were very popular. Very, very popular. Expensive, but popular. People were willing back then to fork out the cash to have their own private copy of a book or a piece of the Psalter and various, recessions of these texts. So I'm coming to sort of the conclusion that the whole site at Qumran was a site that was dedicated to copying texts, and that the caves at Qumran were kind of a geniza, basically a place where you sort of put texts that weren't exactly perfect, kind of a disposal site. Not so much a preservation site, a disposal site. Well, no, it wasn't that you could pawn them off. We find a geniza at Cairo's synagogue. Now, a geniza because you couldn't burn these manuscripts because they were holy. You couldn't burn them, even if they had errors. You couldn't burn them. You couldn't bury them in the ground. You had to do something with them, though. You couldn't use them for liturgical use. So what they did at Cairo was they had a wall between a wall, so a space between a wall, and they threw all these imperfect manuscripts through a hole down between the walls. Yeah, they sort of entombed them, yeah. Well, when they discovered this, the Cairo Geniza, it's one of the most important manuscript discoveries because that one dates to the 12th century AD. Hundreds of texts were in there. Yeah, it was a really cool discovery. Totally cool. I mean, even imperfect texts are super important.
It was circled in red where the mistake is.
So these Genizas are totally cool. So I'm thinking now that the caves at Qumran were Geniza. Essentially, I mean, they're sticking these in jars and they're putting them out in these caves because the idea, I don't think they were trying to preserve these. I don't think they were thinking that far ahead. I mean, I don't think any Israelite in the first century BC, I mean, this site has been going from 2nd century BC all the way to 135 AD. This site had lasted for almost 300 years. I don't think anybody thought that the Rome was going to completely block them off the map. So what you have to then think, okay, what would be their thought process of why they would put these texts in jars and then store them in caves when they could just sell them? My thought here is that they're imperfect manuscripts. Manuscripts that were deemed too imperfect for circulation, for basically sale. You know, and I think I do think they had some kind of quality control. So they were assigned to do a certain project. They started doing it. It didn't meet the quality control. They put it in a clay vessel, stuck it in the cave, and then they went and made another copy that was better. And they then sold that to whoever their client was. So I think what we have here is a manuscript factory. Now, could this have been run by the Essenes? Sure. They would have been more than happy to do this. You know, many religious groups took odd jobs on the side to pay their ritual festivals, etc. This is not uncommon. You know, Christian monasteries did the same thing. So that's what I think is sort of happening here. Is that with the Essenes and at Qumran. Now, was John one of these? Really difficult to say. Really, really difficult to say. We don't know. There were a lot of small groups of Israelites, and especially back in the 1st century, where they're just, you know, you had Pharisees, scribes, Sadducees, Herodians, had all sorts of zealots, all sorts of little factions running around the landscape. So it's hard to tell which faction John would have been a part of, if any faction at all. He does come from a family that would have been in line to be a Sadducee. So apart from that, we know very little. Tony, thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. Okay, Cambrit for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Was the curse from Jeremiah 22, 24 to 30 reversed in Haggai 2, 23, or was the curse limited to Jehoiachin's lifetime? Thanks and God's bless. Well, let's pull up the Bible here and let's find out. All right. I go to Jeremiah 22, 24. As I live, declares the Lord, even though Coniah, son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were a signet ring on my right hand, yet I will pull you off. And I shall give you over into the hand of those who are seeking your life, yes, into the hand of those who you dread, even in the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. That Coniah there, that's Jehoiachin. Okay? And into the hand of the Chaldeans. I shall hurl you and your mother who bore you into another country where you are not born, and there you will die. But as for the land which they desire to return, they will not return to it. Is this man, Coniah, Jehoiachin, a despised and shattered jar, or is he an undesirable vessel? Why have he and his descendants been hurled out, cast into a land that they have not known? O land, 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 hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, write this down, childless, a man who will not prosper in his days, for no man of his descendants will prosper sitting on the throne of David or ruling again in Judah. Okay. The fact is, this is an extension of Isaiah 11. Okay. So this is a prophecy that comes after the fact. So the context of this is going to be Isaiah 11. Let's find Isaiah 11 here. Or let's just look at Haggai first here. Just cover all your bases first. Haggai 2:23. Okay. On that day, declares the Lord of hosts, I will take you, Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, my servant, declares the Lord, and I will make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you. Okay. Now, this Zerubbabel is one of the leaders of the returning exiles. So, but the curse here is really going to, as I said, all of this is in context to Isaiah 11. And I'll just pull up Isaiah 11 here. Isaiah 11. Okay. Which says, then a shoot will spring from the stem of Jesse. Now, this is not the stem. This is the stump. The stump. And it's not a shoot. It's a suckling. Okay, we'll get to those agricultural terms in a moment. And a branch from its roots will bear fruit. Okay. Now, this is the messianic prophecy here of Isaiah 11:1, which is that the royal line of kings will be cut off. Absolutely chopped down. This is the tree of David. This is the tree of David. So think of a big tree that has been just chopped off right at the base. That's what's being communicated in Jeremiah 22:24-30. And this is say the line of David that's cut off. Now, what's being cut off from is being cut off from kingship and from rulership and authority. And while Zerubbabel is going back as one of among the leaders of the Jews, he's not going to rule Israel. Not in the same way. He is more or less going to be a governor underneath someone else. So there's no question that none of the people of the line of David will rule in the same way. So while, yes, God took the ring off for Jehoiachin, put it back on for Zerubbabel, the consequences of that still stands. That none of them will rule as king of Israel, of Judah. But the agricultural language of Isaiah 11:1 is saying, hey, you got this stump, you cut off the whole tree, but there was this little suckling on the side that will grow up. And that branch is Messiah. Christ as the Davidic successor. And his kingdom shall have no end. Again, according to Isaiah. So yes, I don't think the curse was reversed, but it is nuanced. It is in light of other prophecies that are happening in as it regards the whole Davidic line. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. Okay, and our next super chat is from Cole Walker for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Idea: a Skyrim mod based on the New Testament. Preaching against the gods of Cyrodiil and Daedric princes. A workaround for those pesky open world development costs. I like it. Oh yeah, I got some scores to settle with some Daedric princes, so hey, I'm all for this. I'll preach against the gods of Cyrodiil and the Daedric princes. So I love this idea. I think this is a cool idea. Now go program it. I do love Skyrim, but I have to admit I don't much care for its religious system. So if you did make that mod, I think that would be awesome. That would be an absolute awesome mod. So I love it. Absolutely love this idea. I don't have time to do it myself, however, but absolutely, I think would be a phenomenally interesting mod. I'd love to do this. I'd love to see this happen. All right, so anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Rich B.O.B. for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. Do we know how ancient Egyptian color terms work? Yes, we do. He says, examples to be clear is the semantic domain of colors. Say red, evoke blood with no context, but actually should be translated warm colors. Maybe earth blue for earthy colors. Not really. We'll get to that. We'll get to exactly how they viewed it. Maybe black for rocks and water were colors only for animals or for plants. No. Okay, let's get into the Egyptian color system. The Egyptian color system had 8 colors. Okay, white, which they called hedge, yellow or gold, which they called neb, red, which was deshret, green, which was waj, blue, which was mafkat, same as turquoise, essentially. And black, which was chem. Okay, so that's the 8 colors of the Egyptian vocabulary. Okay, now some scribal palettes actually had a lot more colors than that. Some scribal palettes had up to 16 colors. Unfortunately, none of those palettes labeled the colors. So we don't know if they had nuanced terms for those colors, but in almost all writings, they just used the standard 8 terms. Now, they had no distinction here between warm and cool colors. They had no distinction between, say, gold and yellow. For them, it was the same. So if you wanted to call, if you had yellow, they just call it gold. And vice versa. They had no term for orange. They had no term for purple. So there wasn't a whole lot of nuance to their particular color palette. At least linguistically. Artistically is another matter. They did know how to mix colors. They did try to paint things according to, say, what would be called in heraldic terms proper colors. So they wouldn't say necessarily color things naturally. So they would typically paint plants green, animals according to their natural color. So they did try to at least emulate sort of what they saw. Okay, but at the same time too, and we have to be careful here about getting too much into color symbolism too. I've been a huge critic of color symbolism because I don't think it often. I think sometimes color symbolism just doesn't take into account certain things, such as deterioration of art materials, practical considerations when doing art. One of the things we have to understand about art in general is it's really driven by what materials you have. What is your surface mount that you're doing your artwork on, and what are your media, your inks and paints, etc., that you're using to create your composition. Some have called this, say, a pragmatic approach to art history, where art materials really determine what your art looks like. Very few people take that view, to be honest. But I think more in the as we get more and more into the digital age, and people are seeing how the media affects the compositions, I think more people will eventually come to that view. There's a reason why, say, reliefs in stone are done a certain way, or statues in wood are done a certain way, because you're limited by the medium itself. Yeah, my producer said, if more scholars were artists, they might come to that conclusion themselves. You see, in my particular case, I grew up in a family of artists. I worked as a professional artist myself for several years. So, I do have that perspective coming into this. But I don't think the Egyptians had any particular sort of, say, perspective as to, well, this is this color, this is that color, or reserving certain colors for some things. They were pretty, when they wanted to paint something, they would use whatever color that they thought was pragmatic for that. Okay? So anyway, I hope that helped. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. Okay, Jonathan Snyman for 35 South African. Thank you very much. Hi, Dr. Falk. What do you make of people like Graham Hancock's claim that the Sphinx was built long before the ancient Egyptians were around? Oh boy. How do I say this nicely? I think Graham Hancock's ideas are poppycock. I think they're complete rubbish. I have little to no respect for Graham Hancock's ideas. And I think his views on the Sphinx are complete baloney. Absolutely complete baloney. The idea that there'd be this isolated Sphinx on the Giza Plateau, and Khufu decides to build his pyramid the first pyramid on the plateau, way far away from it, makes no sense at all. Makes no sense at all. Okay? It makes a lot more sense that, hey, there's a Sphinx, and it was built along with, every Egyptologist pretty much agrees on this, that the Sphinx was built at the same time as the mortuary temple of Khafre. You know, you know, there's a causeway that goes from the Sphinx temple all the way up to Khafre's pyramid. There's a port that goes right up to the front door of the Sphinx. You know, it's I mean, what Hancock says is complete rubbish. Complete rubbish. And there's no evidence supporting it at all. None. It's just silliness. It really is just silliness. It doesn't fit with the evidence. It doesn't fit with the archaeological context of the site. It's baloney. Total baloney. I have nothing but the lowest opinion of Hancock's, quote, work. He should have stuck to his journalism. Because he's no good at this. He's really no good at it. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Our next super chat is from the Camilla Part for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Shabbat Shalom. Well, Shabbat Shalom to you also. Some English translations rendered Yahweh Yara as the Lord will provide, but the root of Yara seems to refer to looking rather than providing. How should it be translated? Well, that is going to be an interesting question right there. Now, the root of Yara is Ra'ah, which means to see or be seen, to appear, to make yourself known, to be, to manifest. Okay? So there's going to be some sort of this is like all Hebrew words have a large semantic range. So the Lord will provide? It's a possible translation. Not the worst translation I've ever heard. But, the Lord that makes things appear. That's actually not a bad translation of this. But it can be translated other ways too. Okay? The Lord who appears. The Lord of appearances. The Lord of manifestations. So, there's going to be, as I said, a broad semantic range here. And, there's not going to be one translation because, again, Hebrew is semantically broad. It's supposed to be. That's how the language was formulated. So, can't give you a one translation definition because you can't have. Hebrew is not a language that you can nail down to a concordant translation. It doesn't work that way. And by concordant, that means you got one word, one translation. So that's not something you're going to find in Hebrew. So anyway, I want to thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. I hope that provided at least some insight into this. So give you a little more perspective on the question and maybe sort of give you some possibilities here to how to translate this. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Next super chat here. Oopsie. Next super chat here is from Keith Wise. And he says, I'm trying to learn how to super chat. Okay, it worked, no question. I did notice, though, that you do have a question earlier on. And you asked, what does 2 Samuel 7:6 mean? So I got you. Got your question. Let's take that question. Pull up our Bible again. 2 Samuel 7, 6. Okay. And we'll start verse 5 here, because the context will sort of make it clear. Go and say to my servant David, thus says the Lord, are you the one who should build a house for me, build me a house to dwell in? For I have not dwelt in a house since the day I was brought up since I brought up the sons of Israel from Egypt, even to this day. But I have been moving about in a tent, even in a tabernacle. Wherever I have gone with all the sons of Israel, did I speak a word with one of the tribes of Israel, which I commanded to the shepherd my people, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now therefore, thus you shall say to my servant David, thus says the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, that you should be ruler over my people Israel. And verse 9. And I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies from before you. And I will make you a great name, like the names of the great men who are on the earth. I will also appoint a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them, that they may live in their own place and not be disturbed. Nor will the wicked afflict them any more as formerly. And sort of here's the point of the passage in verse 11. Even from the day that I commanded the judges to be over my people Israel, and I will give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord also declares to you that the Lord will make a house for you. See, here's the relationship here. And this is sort of the important bit. It wasn't that the Israelites were supposed to make a house for God. God was making a house for the Israelites. Okay? Okay, now, he is in the verses 12 and 13, and he's going to basically say at this point that, okay, I will say to your descendant, build me a house, and I'll establish his kingdom forever. Okay? So, but the point is, up to this point, between, say, the Exodus and the Davidic kingdom, that God's building a house for Israel. There's no expectation here that Israel's going to build a house for God. So that's what's going on here. We unfortunately right now have a dog party going on in the hallway from our rude neighbors. So if you hear dog barking in the background, that's what's going on. Yeah, so that's inside our building. We have neighbors with pets that are just out of control. So if you hear dog barking, we don't have a dog. We don't have a dog. So, but they're right now. We have just the craziest, most outrageous neighbors imaginable. So we just have to live with that. But anyway, so that's what's going on here. Is that the Davidic kingdom was never meant to, King David was not meant to build this house for the Lord. And the Lord never asked for it. So, anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. I know you didn't mean to use that as a means for this question, but thought we'd throw this in as a bonus. So anyway, I want to thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. And I feel honored that you decided to cut your teeth on doing super chats on my channel. I very much appreciate that. It does really much help our channel, and we so much appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, Gizbo SBOL for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Hi, Dr. Falk. How can we be certain late Bronze Hatzor was destroyed in the 13th century BC rather than later in the 12th century BC? Okay. The reason why is because the last fragments of Mycenaean ware we find at Hatzor, uh, in that destruction layer are Mycenaean 3C. And those, without doubt, date to around in the late 13th century. So there's really no wiggle room there. So we know when that layer is destroyed, it's a very pristine archaeological layer. The whole stratigraphy of Hatzor is very clean. It's probably as ideal as stratigraphy gets at an archaeological site. So it's really the presence of the Mycenaean 3C ware that really sort of um, makes this a sure dating, as it were. So it's definitely late Bronze 2B. So there's really no way out of that. So there's nothing more really to say other than that. That the pottery topology that we find from that strata 1A at Hatzor is that destruction layer after strata 1A is definitely from that period. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. So, but it really comes down to what is the ceramic typology. And the ceramic typology here is really clear. It's really, really clear. So, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So, anyway, thank you for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, Gizbo SBL for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Deuteronomy 11:4 seems to suggest Egypt had suffered a severe decline as a result of the Exodus. Do you think this is hyperbole? No, I don't. Now, let's just see what Deuteronomy 4 says. Deuteronomy 11. Pull up our Bible here. And we'll go from verse 2 here. And know this day that I am not speaking with your sons who have not known and who have not seen the disciple of the Lord your God, his greatness, his mighty hand, and his outstretched arm, and his signs and the work which he did in the midst of Egypt to Pharaoh the king and to all his land, and what he did to Egypt's army, to his horses and chariots, when he made the water of the Red Sea engulf them while they were pursuing you, and the Lord completely destroyed them. Okay. Now, this is the suggestion that Egypt had its army destroyed, not necessarily that the whole nation went into decline. Although this was sort of the beginning of the loss of hegemonic control. After the destruction of the armies of the chariots of Ramses II, it's very, very clear that Egypt no longer had the power to firmly control the Levant. The Philistines were taking over the coastal plain. The Israelites would, in 40 years, start attacking the Judean foothills. It's really clear that their hegemonic control, which was never really an empire, it was never really an empire anyway, was not going to last. And really, they had by the time of Ramses IV, they had completely lost it. That hegemonic control was gone by Ramses IV. They were all, Merneptah, Ramses II's successor, was already having problems. It took him 3 months to drive out the Libyans out of Egypt. So, that's saying something. That would have never happened under Ramses II. The armies of Ramses II was just too powerful. The armies of Merneptah, not so much. So they did go through a decline. They did go through a military decline. And that had some problematic results for them. So while I wouldn't overread that decline, It is very true that their status as a hegemonic power was compromised. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. Okie dokie. Mr. Phil Fox, great to see you. Wow, it's been a while. Uh, Fantastic to see you here tonight. And thank you very much for that very generous super chat. I very, very much appreciate it. And he says, God bless you, brother. Love and prayers to you and your family. Well, thank you so much. God bless you and your family as well. As I said, it's great to see you. It's been a long time. Uh, as I said, I really wanted to be on your channel, and unfortunately that never worked out. But uh, yeah, that I'm so glad you're here tonight. I love the whole sort of bodega crew, and they're great people. So I would recommend my other viewers to go watch Mr. Phil Fox's channel. And any of, say, the Bodega crew, like BK Apologist. You know, they're great people, wonderful workers for the Lord, and then they're a whole lot of fun, too. They're a whole lot of fun. I really, really enjoy being with them. So, anyway, thank you so much for the super chat, and it's really great to see you here tonight. I did see your comment earlier on. I was going to comment on, then I saw you super chat. So, it's fantastic that you're here. So glad you could join us tonight. And God bless you. Okay. Sentinel Apologetics for $5 Australian. Thank you very much. Hi, Rob. Daddy Falk, much love. Hope you're well. I'm still not. What can I say? I have a compromised respiratory system. I had the flu 8 weeks ago, and I'm still fighting. I'm still fighting a cough as a result from this. So, um, um, you do hear me sputter and choke every so often. That's just going to happen. And he goes on. Here's a juicy one from Dwayne Garrett on Exodus 1:16. Look at the baby's testicles bottom, not 2 stones. What the heck? Okay, I'll go to the next one. Okay, his next super chat. Garrett's argument. If hair in the hip on the potter's wheel is behind El Avanim, it might be a euphemism for sex organs derived from canoe. Oh, wow. Oh. Oh. Yes. I don't think so. No. Where does he even, how does he even derive that? Let me just see where he even derives that, how he derives that. Oh, okay. Aha. Wow. Just looking at the Hebrew here just a second. Yeah, the stones. Yeah, it's a dual. Okay. Yeah, no, this is definitely wrong. Okay, this is definitely wrong. Let's bring up this verse, and we'll talk about this because this is whacked. Um, yeah, this is not a reference to the sex organs of baby boys because obviously he doesn't know what the sex organs of baby boys look like. Um, um, okay, the verse here. And he said to them, when you're helping the women to give birth, you'll see them upon the birth stool. Okay? If it is a son, you'll put them to death. As daughter, then she shall live. Okay, the contention here is upon the birth stool. Now, birth stool here is a bad translation anyway. Okay? This should be upon the stones. Okay, that's what it says in the text. Now, in males, little boys, well, let's just say their stones haven't dropped yet. Okay? So in infant boys, they have the sausage, but not the meatballs yet, because the meatballs have not dropped down. So they're not visible. I can't believe I'm talking about this. Okay. So this guy has never changed the diaper on a baby boy. Clearly.
And we'll leave it at that.
And we'll leave it at that. What this is talking about is birthing bricks. Okay? The birth stool here, the stones in the dual. Okay? So 2 stones. This is called, and these are birthing bricks. Okay? And we find these in Egypt. Okay? This was a common method of childbirth in Egypt, where the pregnant mother would stand on 2 bricks to give her a little bit of height, to give her a bit of an elevation. And then gravity would help her give birth. And then the midwife would be there to catch the child. Okay? Just hope you don't have a squirmy one. Okay? So, these are birthstones. These are birthstones. And we have several examples of these from Egypt. Joseph Wegner wrote a very, very good paper on a set of decorated birth bricks that he found. Okay? So, this is actually one of the cultural artifacts from Egypt that we find actually in the Pentateuch here. This has nothing to do with sex organs. That's just loony. Garrett's interpretation is just loony. Just dumb. He just does not. He does not understand the historical context. Well, that was a most interesting question, even if it does get us demonetized here. Thanks, Rob. So anyway, thank you very much for those super chats. Perhaps. Not so sure about the questions, though. It's not a euphemism. Okay, not a euphemism. Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay. Lion Green for $2. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Is Vespasian the typological man of lawlessness? That is hard to say. We do know that the archetype, the typological man of lawlessness was Nero. Okay? And most scholars will agree with that at this point. But not even he is as typological as Antiochus Epiphanes. So there is going to be many types of man of lawlessness. not just one. Okay? You got Antiochus Epiphanes, you got Nero, you got Vespasian, and you're going to have Domitian. Each one of these is going to be their own man of lawlessness. So, anyway, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. But again, we should say, well, I should add one more thing to this, which is there are a type, and then there's the consummation of it. So, while Vespasian is a type of man of lawlessness, he's not the archetype of it, and he's not the consummation of it. He's just one type along the way. We don't know who that final man of lawlessness will be. That's still to come. So anyway, I hope that helped. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, the next one is from Ed Ming of Is Mad Love for $30. Well, thank you very much for the very generous super chat. Very much appreciated. And he asks, apologies, Dr. Falk. This is an off-the-wall question. What is your opinion on Christians who believe theistic evolution? I heard a live stream this week that claimed that they are hurting the gospel, source Africa Without Borders. Ugh. I am no fan of compatibilist theories. Okay? Now, what do I mean about compatibilist theories? Theories that try to compatibilize secular science with the Bible. Okay? Now, so I'm not a fan of theistic evolution. I'm not a fan of young earth creationism either. For the same reasons. I think both are not good at exegesis. I think they have to do a lot of liberties with biblical exegesis to try to make it work with, say, whatever they perceive as the scientific data. I have mostly stayed out of the origins game. At least I try to stay out of it. I'm not a creationist. I'm not an evolutionist. I believe in Genesis 1 insofar as it is correctly and contextually interpreted. And that seems to be a problem these days. So, I don't think it necessarily hurts Christianity. I don't think it necessarily helps Christianity. I think we need to embrace the fallibility of human understanding. I think our understanding of origins from, say, a secular science perspective is incomplete. When I went to college, I did an undergrad science program. And since that time, evolution has changed dramatically in its models and evidence. It's not the same evolution that I took in college. And that was like 30 years ago. So if evolution is still in a process of change in just 30 years as far as its theories and understandings go, and major changes, I mean, these aren't just minor changes, these are major changes. I'm not ready to hitch my understanding on something that's changing that rapidly. Now, on the same vein, our understanding of biblical exegesis has changed dramatically over the last 150 years. We have now learned more about the Bible in the last 50 years than in the last 1,500 years. So our understanding of the Bible is also in rapid change. So I think there's a lot of I'm not going to get dogmatic about origins at all here. I think that's a fool's game. I think that's a fool's game. And I also think that there's nothing that compels me to pick a side. There's nothing in the Bible that says you have to make this compatible with the world. Because Genesis 1 is basically setting out a religious paradigm. Yes, it is in context to the creation of the world. But it's doing it in the framework of a religious temple context, essentially establishing the parameters and boundaries of sacred space. That's not a model that's going to fit to any scientific understanding. It's two different models. It's two different perspectives. One is looking at the world religiously. The other is going to look at it, say, naturalistically. You're not going to get the same outcomes. So attempting to compatibilize that is going to be a nightmare. Because it's not the same. There's no common ground. So on the one hand, I think some theistic evolution does a disservice, honestly, to the Gospels, to the Gospels, to the biblical texts. I think some theistic evolutionists are more biblical than young Earth creationists by a long shot. So it's really going to depend. Yes, the worst of theistic evolution is going to be, basically a hair's thread away from deism and naturalism. Okay, a hair's breadth away from that. The best of theistic evolution is going to be high Christological, very contextual, and very biblical. As I said, much more biblical than, say, young Earth creationism. And by this I mean American young Earth creationism. It's really going to depend. I don't think it's fair to treat it with a broad brush. You have to look at the particular point of view and its nuances before you can really make a determination here of, is this hurting the gospel? So I think this is an important issue, but it isn't one that's restricted to theistic evolution. Frankly, there's some American young Earth creationism that's doing tremendous harm to the gospel. Tremendous harm. Some American young Earth creationism is driving people into atheism. And in some ways, that's more dangerous, because it's basically positing that there's one way to interpret, say, Genesis. And if that one way doesn't work out, those people flip almost instantly to atheism. And it's a very dangerous hermeneutic. Very, very dangerous hermeneutic. So, the whole idea of these compatibilist theories harming, the gospel isn't just the theistic evolutionists. It's also other views as well. This is why I stay out of that game. I stay out of that game entirely. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it, and I hope that answers your question. Okay. Mora for $20. Good to see you here tonight. It was good seeing you on the Discord as well. And by the way, we do have a link in the video description for anyone who also wants to join us on the Discord server. And she asks, were the Canaanites being punished in the conquest? John Walton says no. I agree with Walton here. Quote, they were treated like chaos creatures, not like sinners. So the text depicts them as uman manda to make it clear what's going on. Thoughts? Okay. Walton's view is that the Canaanites are being driven out. And he takes that particular translation of harem as to drive out, to set apart, as being pushing them out. I think there's definitely merit to that view. I think it is a view that I think has legs. It's probably not a perfect view, but no view of the conquest is perfect as far as I can tell. But I do think the point here is to push out the Canaanites, to push them out so Israel can inherit the land. So I don't think they were being necessarily punished. They were just more or less told to skedaddle, and they didn't. So I more or less agree with Walton's view on the conquest here. But I think there's other views that are also, have input as well. So I don't think Walton's is the only say on this one, but I think his particular view on this is very important. And I think it's the best of the views I've heard. But again, I think it's not incompatible with other readings of the conquest as well. So I'm going to leave it at that for the moment. So to let you sort of digest that, I do think it's because the reputation of the Israelites preceded them. It's not like any of these Canaanites didn't know that the Israelites were coming. They knew they were coming. We were told that the fear of the Israelites had taken a hold of them, and they were basically being forced out of these land holdings. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. Okay, the Camilla part for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Why was it that God appointed unrighteous judges? Were there slim pickings during those times? Wow. That's an interesting question. That's a very interesting question. In some respects, yes, there were slim pickings at the time. Let's just say, for example, let's take Jephthah. Let's take the Judges 11 example. They go to nobody can defend the holdings against the Ammonites. I mean, they had been under oppression in Judges chapter 10, and they had a couple judges that liberated them, but now they had nobody who was able to do it. So they go to this son of a harlot who had been thrown out of his family, who was hanging around empty men, He was hanging around dirtbags, no goods, thugs. And they basically say to him, hey, we're under oppression by the Ammonites. We need you to come back and be our leader and defend us. Yeah, I think they're scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point. If they have to go to Jephthah, yeah, they're in tough straits. They hadn't done what was necessary to defend their holdings. So, absolutely, sometimes, yeah, God appointed some pretty awful people to act as judges. Now, Samson's not a good guy. Oh, Samson's awful. Horrible judge. Terrible judge. I mean, I really despise when people use Samson as a role model for kids in Sunday school. Because man, he's the worst role model. Absolutely. He cares nothing about holy things. Um, he'll. Oh,
He sells out his integrity for the stupidest.
yeah, he sells out his integrity for the stupidest things. Uh, he sleeps with whatever woman catches his eye. I mean, it's just, he'll eat honey from a corpse. Just, ugh, ew, ick.
It was a corpse of a lion.
It was a corpse of a lion, by the way, but still, I mean, it was just that is ritually impure in the Israelite thinking. And he gives the honey to his parents, making them ritually impure. They didn't know where it came from, but that's the sort of guy Samson was. He was a dirtbag. And he was all about revenge. I mean, his final prayer was to do this suicidal act to get vengeance. Not a good guy. I mean, terrible. But that's the sort of, yes, this is slim pickings all the way around. And that's why sometimes God just chooses who can do it. That's just sometimes how it works. And we see this throughout the history of not only the Bible, but the church as well. Martin Luther. Wow. Foul-mouthed Augustinian priest. Augustinian monk. John Newton. Slave driving. Foul-mouthed ship captain. He was vulgar. Talk about a vulgar man. John Newton, the guy who wrote Amazing Grace. you would not. That man. People who sat in his sermons couldn't believe the language. Could not believe the language that would come out of that man's mouth. We all get sort of uptight about how people speak today, because we've been sanitized by 1950s Christianity. But boy, some of the people in the history of the Christian church used a lot of blue language. Whoa. But God used them for a certain time. Without John Newton, we wouldn't have had, what's his name now? The guy who did the, free the slaves in England. What's his name now? Wilberforce. We wouldn't have had Wilberforce. So, these people are without Martin Luther, we wouldn't have had the Protestant Reformation. So God uses people like this. He uses the broken vessels to affect his change. So this is part of the church. We do have people that will just say things what God calls them to say. And sometimes not always in the nicest terms. So God did appoint, some really unsavory characters to be judges. And a lot of it is slim pickings. We see in the prophet Ezekiel, God says to Ezekiel, I have nobody to send as a prophet. And Ezekiel goes, here I am, Lord, send me. And the Lord says, they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to pay attention to you. And Ezekiel goes, that's fine. Send me anyway. And I think we're living now in such a time as this. I think we're living in the same sort of days today, where the church needs some straight talk. The church needs some really, really straight talk. And it's not getting it. It's not receiving it. And I think people are falling away because they can't tell when the guy in the pulpit is telling it straight up or just sanitizing it for numbers and filling pews. So this is something that concerns me greatly, because I think we're in the days again where we're back to slim pickings. We are living, it said in the Judges that every man did what was right in their own eyes. We're back to those days. We are totally back to those days. The church today is living like Canaanites. We're living like Canaanites. And we need to see that. And we're back to where we need almost a second Reformation, if we want to turn the ship around at all. So anyway, I want to thank you for the super chat. Very, very much appreciate it. And it is sobering because it is so applicable to us today as well. So thank you for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. Okay, mystery flavor for $20. Thank you very much for the super chat. What would it have meant to have been excluded from the assembly of the Lord in Deuteronomy 23, 1-8? Okay. Just bring up the verse here, just to be sure we're on the same page. Deuteronomy 23, 1-8. Pull up a Bible here. And it says, no one who is emasculated or has his male organ cut off shall enter the assembly of the Lord. No one of illegitimate birth shall enter the assembly of the Lord. None of his descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall enter the assembly of the Lord. No Ammonite or Moabite shall enter the assembly of the Lord. None of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, shall enter the assembly of the Lord, because they did not meet you with food and water by the way when you came out of Egypt, because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor of Pethor, from Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse you. Nevertheless, the Lord your God is not willing to listen to Balaam, but the Lord your God turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord loves you. You shall never seek their peace or their prosperity all your days. You shall not detest an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not detest an Egyptian, because you are an alien in his land. The sons of the 3rd generation who are born from them may enter the assembly of the Lord. Okay. So what does it mean to be in the assembly of the Lord? It essentially means having access to the temple and or the tabernacle. So the assembly are those who are able to participate in the religious rituals. Okay. Now, this does not include some things like Passover. Everyone's allowed to participate in Passover if they're, born of Israel. But if you are excluded for certain reasons, and the reasons, here it gives here is, if they've been emasculated or if they're illegitimate, those people can still participate in, say, the home rituals like Passover, Feast of Tabernacles, etc. But what they can't do is they can't go to the temple precinct or the tabernacle precinct. Okay, so we know, for example, from, say, the temple, that the temple had 3 courts. At least the Solomonic temple did. The later Herodian temple of Herod, it had 4 courts. Now, in the inner court, you had that was the court of the priests, and inside of that, you also had the temple proper with the Holy of Holies. But you had a court on the outside of that called the court of the men. And only men were permitted into that. So in that first court, the court of the priests, we only had priests and Levites could go into there. core of the men, only men, and then outside of that, the core of the women, which had women and children. So it was a segregated religious system. Now, in the during the temple that was expanded by King Herod, he also had a court of the Gentiles, where Gentiles could come congregate and worship God. Okay? So being excluded from the assembly meant you couldn't go into those inner three courts. You were not permitted to participate in any of that. Like, so for example, if you wanted to bring an offering to the Lord, you couldn't do it yourself if you were excluded. Like, for example, if you had leprosy, or if you had been an illegitimate, you couldn't go bring your sacrifice, your offerings to the temple yourself. You'd have to send a proxy in your place, and that's how they used to do that. In the case where, like for example, temples were not just the temple was not just a religious institution; it was also an institution of the state. People would not just bring their tithes to the temple, but also their taxes. So, this was actually a very important function of the Solomonic Temple. Was you had to bring your not just your tithe, but your taxes. Your tithe may be 10%, and your taxes are an additional 2%. So you brought your taxes as well to the temple. So for a person excluded from the assembly, they weren't excluded from taxation. They just had to send a representative to bring their taxes to the temple. So this was a social exclusion, but it didn't always prevent them from doing the rituals. It just, they had to do it through someone else. They had to use a proxy. And proxies were allowed. The so-called, it was long recognized that, for example, a kinsman redeemer, you could use a kinsman to do the rituals on your behalf. So there was ways that somebody who was excluded from the assembly could participate in the temple rituals and the state obligations, but they could also there was also say, because this is holy space, that holy space, those three courts that were considered holy, you couldn't just, if you were excluded as a physically marred specimen or in some ways abnormal. One of the things about, say, kosher laws, ritual purity, is ritual purity prized normality. It prized normality. And this is what's meant by, say, clean versus unclean, kosher versus unkosher. What's normal versus what's abnormal. So what was normal was you're a physically, at least, unmarred human being. You don't carry a communicable disease. You are, if you're a man, you got all your wedding tackle intact. That's the sort of thing it's looking at, is normality for fitness of worship. So outside of that, if you were abnormal and you were, say, outside of the assembly, you had to then use a proxy. And that's what then worship then would look like. And that's what it would have meant for you, is you would have had to have used a proxy in your place. Now, a lot of people who were outside the assembly didn't use proxies or didn't participate in the rituals at all. They still had to send their taxes. Nobody gets out of taxes. But that's sort of what it would look like for those people who were outside of the assembly. Is they would had to do things a little different, but there was still sort of means for them to do it. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay. Paulus Patros for $10 Canadian. Thank you very much for the super chat. You've said that the job of a scholar is to be constantly reading and staying up to date with scholarship. How do you find the right books to read? Do you subscribe to a library, journals, etc.? Great question. As academics, we do try to find tricks to do this. We do subscribe to journals. This is one of the reasons why we're members of a bunch of societies, is because most academic societies also provide a journal. Like, for example, the Azor publishes 3 journals. I'll plug here JETS, which is, for example, the Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society. Let's see, I think I've got a couple down here too. I've got here Journal of the American Research Center in Egypt. So, there's a reason why you spend like $500,000 a year on society memberships, is to get the journals, because the journals contain the latest research. They contain the latest research, and they contain the best research, and they're peer reviewed. All these are peer reviewed. So a lot of it is just knowing what societies you need to be a member of. My producer here is a member of the Evangelical Philosophical Society, EPS. She's a member of that society. Of course, the interesting thing is, only I qualify for a member of the ETS, and she only qualifies as a member for the EPS. So, very well, guys. At least if you want broad as access to journals. Okay, books are less important. Books, you can, if you are, say, for example, connected with a academic institution, you can get a lot of books now online because their libraries provide that.
Also, there's university near them.
Yeah, your local university can
usually let people come in and
will allow you often to have access to their stacks and allow you to read their books. Some of them will even issue you what's called community access. So if you're a member of the local community, they might give you a library card. They might give you a small membership fee. I don't know. Some do, some don't. That you can actually come in, check out books, and read them. So it is really, really important to stay up to date on your reading. And it's hard. One of the tricks that a lot of scholars do, and I include myself in this, is we'll sometimes do book reviews. Okay? With book reviews, some of these journals will send you a book to review, and you'll read it, you write a 1,000-word book review, and you send it back. It's a great way to force you to continue to read. In fact, and you get a free book out of it too, which is actually totally awesome. Although I've got one now that's due by Tuesday that's just like hanging over my head like Damocles' sword, which I would have really have preferred that this whole debate thing had been out of the way so I could have concentrated on that. So that thing's going to consume my entire Sunday. But at that said, it does force you to keep reading. It does force you to keep reading. And I think that's really, really important that as scholars, we continue to read. It's the bread and butter of our jobs. Keeping on top of the current research, doing everything that you can to just sort of stay ahead of the research curve, because it's constantly changing. And it's just more or less you read voluminously. Now, the thing about reading voluminously is the more you read, the faster you end up reading these things. Because one of the things is that your first few books are going to take you a long time to read. Okay? They're going to take you a long time to read. And then you get to book like 20, and you just go, oh yeah, I know this information. And you just sort of flip past the information you know. So your 20th book on the same subject you might spend like, I don't know, hour or two reading it, and you're done. You've read it. Because all the information that they've given you, you've seen elsewhere. You've seen elsewhere. So the more you read, the faster you end up going through books. Because there's less and less, the more you read, the less and less new information you encounter. So that's how you stay on top of it, is just reading more. And that's the big secret. The more you read, the easier it is to stay on top of it. And then it's just, you read the journals for the new stuff. You know? And that's really all you need to do here to sort of stay on top of it. It's a discipline, though. It's a discipline. And it takes time. And as I say over many of these live streams, I wish I had more time to read. Because it's the one part of scholarship I enjoy. I really enjoy the reading aspect of it. I wish I had the time to do it more. But earning a living will often interfere with that. And that's just the price you pay for, you have to balance that somehow. Your reading schedule with the necessities of life. But a lot of us, as I said, there's tricks you can do to force yourself to read more. And society memberships that give you magazines and journals are a great way to do this. Great way to do this. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciate it. Okay, and that is, I think, the last of the super chats. Oh, wait, nope. I have to stop this to start again. Oh, come on. My Twidget conked out again. Alrighty. I got several still, yeah. Ooh. Hope I didn't lose any here. Oh boy, it did not load that properly. I'm going to try it one more time here. Yeah. If not, I'll copy them and... Yeah, it did not. It conked out there. All right. Just give me a moment. I'll have to start copying and pasting these because... Okay, and we'll just do it that way. Widget sometimes conks out and stops loading the live chat, which is unfortunate. But we will make sure we get all of these. Okay. I see it. I see it. Okay. Just need to save as. So this is going to be a little slow for a few minutes, and then, okay. All right, so we'll go back to our non-Twidget here. And, okay, Destiny Knight for $9.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Dr. Falk, as a biologist seminary student, I'd like to apologize for the whole debacle. I assure you that there is much more competence and intellectual honesty in the Old Testament department. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that there's more competence and intellectual honesty there. Yeah, I was disappointed. I was disappointed. I was disappointed with how I was treated. I was disappointed with the level of intellectual exchange with my interlocutor. Um, I I did find the whole process kind of shameful, honestly, and I'm not going to sort of dwell on that. But I do appreciate the sentiments. The good news is that I do have my own copy of the debate, and it will be going up Monday with my commentary, and then on Wednesday without any commentary at all. So I appreciate the apology. I kind of wish that would have come from Sean, honestly. If that had come from Sean, it would have been a lot different. But what I got was kind of, well, I owe you an apology. Hmm, okay. Are you going to apologize? Oh, look at the time.
Most people don't even realize I owe you an
Yeah. I when I got the message from him that goes, I owe you an apology, it's like, okay, is that an apology? Like,
He thought it was.
yeah, I don't know if he realized how that came off, but saying, well, I owe you $1 million. Okay. You gonna give me $1 million? Nope.
Just go ahead.
I just owe you it. Most banks, if you say to your bank, yeah, I owe you $1 million, they go, okay, when are you gonna pay? Yeah, about that.
Movie.
Moving on. The art of the apology is kind of dead. It really is. People don't know how to apologize anymore, and it's really unfortunate too because it kind of makes forgiveness also very hard. But I do appreciate your sentiments here, and I do wish Biola well. I hope that program does prosper. I think we need institutions that are competent and intellectually honest. And so I do really think that there's a need for these sort of things. I just wish that when you know we can have a more um, intellectually rigorous approach that doesn't vilify the person who is necessarily knows his stuff better. So and it was the vilification that was really the worst part of all this. You know, moving on. Anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. I very much appreciate it, and I do very much appreciate the sentiments. Next super chat, and I also need to clip this one again. Again, take a few moments here. Okay. Okay, our next super chat is from Destiny Knight 77 for $9.99 again. Thank you very much for the super chat. I've noticed increased anti-Trinitarian sentiments among Western Christians. I wondered if you could speak to this a bit. What are your thoughts? Ooh. Ooh. Oh boy. Um. Oh. I think anti-Trinitarianism is outside the historic Christian faith. Okay. It's its own thing. It's not Christian, though. Christianity has been pretty much clear from the early church fathers that one of the most important doctrines is the belief in the Trinity. That Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are the three persons are the one God. So I think once you've sort of stepped over that line to non-Trinitarianism, you're outside of the Christian faith at that point. I don't think you have any reasonable claim on Christianity at that point, honestly. I know there are groups out there that think they're Christian that are non-Trinitarian, and and it isn't just say, for example, Oneness Pentecostals, or say Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons. It's also open theists that also will reject the Trinity at times. So I think it's a disturbing trend. But I really think if you are, taking scripture as it says, as far as God describing itself, I think a Trinitarian worldview is inevitable. You have to, you cannot do anything other than be a Trinitarian. Now, with that said, for those people who are not Trinitarian and are not Christian, yeah, whatever. They're doing their own thing. Okay, but as far as, say, as an issue within the Christian church, that has to be a dividing line. Yeah, that has to be a dividing line. You cannot be a non-Trinitarian and still be a Christian. It's just, you're now something else.
The analogy, if you're taking it to get to the destination, you're going to the moon.
Yeah.
You're not going.
Essentially, you have a different view of God. And that's what it boils down to, is you have a different view of Christ, you have a different view of God. And without Trinitarianism, you just have no way to arrive at God as defined by the historic Christian faith. You got the wrong God. So that's sort of my thoughts on that. I just do not see a non-Trinitarian being a Christian. It's antithetical. It's completely opposite to what the historical Christian faith has stood for 2,000 years. So I thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Next one here is another Clippy again. Yeah. Okay. And the next question is from the Camelopard for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Question partially borrowed from @KeepsLearning. Okay. What was the darkness of the ninth plague? Were the heavens covered, sandstorm? Is it related to darkness of the crucifixion? Ooh. Good question. The darkness of the ninth plague, I think, is materially different from the crucifixion. Now, the crucifixion does seem to be more of that the sun was darkened. The materiality of the ninth plague is very interesting because it wasn't just darkening of the sun, but it was darkening inside of people's homes. And that's very interesting. You look at that sort of the thing, it was just like, even the candles weren't giving them light. So we're dealing with something here that's very different and very strange.
Very terrifying.
Very terrifying. So this is something that's exceptionally interesting in that it's not just the sun being darkened. It's also that the darkness had sort of a thickness to it, almost. That it sort of swept through and into people's homes. Yeah, it penetrated walls. It so that they were. It was dark even indoors. I mean, that's a strange phenomenon right there.
There would be no sense of safety.
Yeah. Yeah, as my producer just said, there's be no sense of safety where you could get away from it. Now, what was it? That's another question. I think in the case of the crucifixion, what we're talking about here is a solar eclipse, probably, in all likelihood. In the case of the ninth plague, I think we're dealing with a different phenomena. I think what we might be dealing with here is maybe possibly a sandstorm, or a sandstorm combined with, say, fire, ash that's been put up in the atmosphere, which can happen sometimes. Sometimes there you can have a fire that just sort of is picked up by a sandstorm and intermingles with the sand. So that you have, say, high altitudes, basically sand and soot that blocks out the sun, but it has fine particulates that create sort of a darkness as it sort of sweeps over. Now, I've only been in one sandstorm in my life, and you can't see nothing. Now, it's not dark, so that's why it would have to be also, say, a high atmospheric sandstorm. But boy, you can't see anything in a sandstorm. It just sort of blots out everything. It's crazy. It's crazy how, did not want to be caught in that. That's for sure. That's just, I mean, I saw it roll towards me, and I saw the houses just disappear behind the sand. It's just like, whoa. Hey, driver, step it on the pedal, please. Yeah, we do not want to be caught in that. So, that's sort of my thinking. It might be a combination of sand and ash. Where the sand is in the high atmosphere blotting out the sun, but the ash is sort of creating a dark cloud that sort of rolls right in. There have been times similar, like for example, from volcanic eruptions, where, for example, there's enough ash in the air. It's fine ash. It's fine ash, so it'll block out. It'll make things seem darker. Like some people after the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Some places the ash came down like snow, but other places it was kind of like a fine cloud that sort of drifted through towns, and you couldn't see anything. So it's hard to say for sure, but there are possibilities here, and possibilities that are quite natural that could account for this. We also have secular records in, say, in ancient Egypt, where the sun has been blotted out. It doesn't describe it as blotting out the light inside the houses, but we got, for example, in both the papyrus, Ipuwer papyrus, and the papyrus of Prophecy of Nefertiti, where the sun is blotted out, and darkness covers the land. So it does seem to be a phenomenon that's occurred more than once in Egypt. At least 3 times, if we include the Exodus account as well. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated, and it's an interesting question. Okay, the next one here is, okay, we're back to Twitch it again. Okay. AB for $19.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Genesis 1:7. Could you explain what the firmament is and what water did they think was above it? I was talking with a guy who was trying to use this passage to show that there was water in the sky. Okay. Excellent question. Now, what we're talking about here is analogical language. The firmament, in Hebrew called the rakia, is what would we call either, it was a dome. It was the idea that a dome covered the earth. And it was known as the celestial ocean. Okay? You look down below, there's water in the ocean, it's blue. You look in the sky, water comes down from the sky, and it's blue, it's also a celestial ocean. So that's the sort of the thinking here, is that the expanse, the rakia, is a kind of ocean above their head. Now, there is some warrant for this. You know, it's not an unreasonable analogy. We do have water content in the sky, in the form of clouds. There was a theory in, say, young Earth creationism, and to be honest, even some evolutionists have held to this at times, that there was a vapor canopy, in the sky. Now, most paleontologists today do not hold to the vapor canopy view, and basically, it's generally agreed that Earth did not have a vapor canopy. Although, if we look at, say, for example, Venus. Venus has a vapor canopy of sulfuric acid. Not pleasant, by the way. But the whole idea of the rakia is that it is a celestial ocean. That's what the idea is. So the idea that there is an expanse, a rakia, and above it was a celestial ocean, but below it is also water. So the whole idea in Genesis 1 is that God is separate. He's encountering this world that's nothing but water. It's just got water. And what God is doing in Genesis 1 is separating water from water. So you've got the water of the sky, and then you got the water below the sky. And that's being separated then out to make the oceans to appear separate from the dry land. So that's sort of what's going on here, is God's taking a formless world, a water world. He's taking a water world and separating it out. Yeah, starring Kevin Costner. Oh, let's not go there, please. Not Waterworld. Ugh. Ugh. Terrible film. Terrible film. Okay. So, the whole question of the whole water in the sky thing, the water above of the firmament, is the idea of the celestial ocean, essentially. Whether that's clouds, whether it's a vapor canopy, I'll leave that up to the creationists and the evolutionists to fight that out. But that's sort of the analogy here. Is it's water in the sky, essentially. That's what it comes right down to. It's water in the sky, and there is water in the sky. I live in Vancouver. It's very wet here. I can tell you for a fact that there's water in the sky. It keeps pouring down on me. So, I know for a fact there's water in the sky. But that's what it's driving at here. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. I hope that provided some insight here. Very much appreciate your super chat. Okay, and Slim2K for $2. Hi, can you expand on Genesis 1 being about a temple? Yes, and thank you very much for the super chat. Okay, it's Genesis 1 is full of cultic language. It is very, very full of cultic language, and so is Genesis 2. And what we mean by cultic language is the language of temples. Okay, the 7 days of creation are basically 3 spaces that are transformed and filled. Now, we talked a little bit about the architecture of the temple, the Jerusalem temple, earlier on. 3 courts. Accident? Hardly. Okay. 3 courts, 3 spaces in creation. This is not an accident. So you have the heavens and the earth and the oceans. 3 spaces of creation that are then filled with life on the other days of creation. And then the Lord resting from it. But his chief creation was the creation of mankind. And it uses 2 words that are associated with idols. You know, he created man in his image and his likeness. Both of those are cultic words. They're used for votive idols. They're used for the idols that you see in a temple. And then God fills those images with his spirit, makes them living beings. So, in a large respect, creation was God's temple. We, as humans, were the walking image of God. And then God creates his Holy of Holies as the garden. God plants a special garden. That's Eden. Now, where things get super interesting is when man falls. And you see that separation between sacred space and profane space. And God puts cherubim and seraphim to guard that sacred space from defilement and casts out his images. But that's that sort of that guarding of the cherubim and the seraphim. Seraphim are there too, guarding it. That's the flaming sword. The flaming sword is a euphemism for seraphim. And the reason why they use that language in Genesis is so you don't mistake the seraphim for the Nakash, the serpent in the garden, because seraphim are often represented as serpents. So they use a different language to make sure you're not confused. So, so that's a little bit of the language here. It's very, very cultic. It's definitely temple imagery. There's no mistaking it's temple imagery. You know, and God is walking in the garden amongst his images. So, anyway, I hope that helped explain this. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. It's a fascinating. I actually wanted to write a book on this at one point, and I actually had applied for a grant to do that, but didn't get the grant. So, yeah, easy come, easy go.
And they want to send us
a Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. And yeah, that's it's an interesting topic, and I think more needs to be done on this. But again, I wasn't able to do it. All right. Faye of the Duat for $2. Good to see you here tonight. I'm still glad you're coming to our live streams. It's wonderful to have you here. Okay, I finally mastered the quail chick. Awesome. You do need that UW. I mean, the quail chick is essential. You need to. I kind of wish my owls looked better, honestly. Quail chick, I'm fine. I have no problem doing the quail chick. For me, it's the owls. The owls I find are just obnoxious. Um, I have such a difficult time. My owls always look like they've uh, that they look bent. It just just my owls never look good. Or sorry, yeah, my owls. Quail chick I was fine with. I had found the quail chick very easy. The owl still bothers me to this day. But we do practice and we hope to get the writing right. So it's good to hear from you, and I'm glad to hear you were successful with the quail chick. A lot of people have problems with the quail chick. I don't know why, but I guess it's something to do with the it doesn't have the same sort of body shape and people. Um, but yeah, for me, it's always the owl. The owl is just weird shape. It's a weird shape, and it doesn't have uh, a oh. She adds here. My quails are blobs with stick feet. Well, my owls look like they've been run over by a car. So, what can I say? As long as you get the face right on the owl, people can figure it out. But I mean, my owls are not great looking. I'll admit that. My vultures look great. I have great looking vultures, but my my owls leave something to be desired. But great to hear from you, and great to hear you've gotten success at doing the owls. Okay. Jack Ray for $10. He just sends us a super sticker. Thank you very much for the super sticker. Very much appreciate it. Thank you for your donation. Very much appreciate this. It really does help keep the channel going. It puts food on our table, and we really appreciate that. Um, it we love doing these live streams, and your donations help us to continue doing it. So we very, very much appreciate the support. We appreciate the prayers too. We know we face spiritual powers and darkness in high places. So we're so thankful for people who support this ministry.
Darkness in pretty low places.
Yeah, there's a lot of darkness in low places as well. Yeah, we're discovering that too. So, anyway, we very much appreciate your support. Thank you very much for the super chat or the super sticker. Very much appreciated. Thank you so very much. Okay. Edson Weir. Hi for $1.99. Hello, how you doing? It was great to have you on the after party the other night. I hope you fixed that that console of yours. But it's good to see you here tonight. If you do have a question at some point, please feel free to ask, and we will definitely answer it. But anyway, I want to thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it, and hello to you too. Oh, you got one coming up? Okay. Right, our next super chat is from Pablo Andres for $9.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. How historical is the Old Testament? Did everyone exist? How is the resurrection of the dead supposed to work? Are only some resurrected? Ooh, those are two very substantial and different questions. How historical is the Old Testament? It's historical in its context. Okay. Did everyone exist? Well, some of the poetic figures did not exist. Like, for example, wisdom is personified in the Proverbs as a woman. She is a representation, an analogy. She doesn't exist as a real person. Okay? But the historical figures, in my opinion, did all exist. Some may have been idealized. Some may have been aggregated. We do find this, that some of the historical figures in, say, the Old Testament are aggregates of several people. So it's going to really depend on what you mean by did everyone exist. In some way, yes, but not in every way. Like, for example, the Pharaoh, what sometimes people call sometimes the oppression Pharaoh, in Exodus 1, is actually an aggregation of several Egyptian kings, going from Ahmose I all the way to Ramses II. And did that person literally exist as one continuous being over time? No, but it was several beings, real people that were aggregated together into a literary unity. So that's going to be one of those things that we have to keep in mind, is that there are times when the writers of the Old Testament are going to do literary devices for the sake of the narrative. So how historical is the Old Testament is going to depend on how you interpret the Old Testament. It's going to depend upon what the author's intention was. Like, for example, though the patriarchs in Genesis 5 did not live for 900 years continuously, they are basically a literary unit expressing the lifespan of a clan. And ancient readers seem to have accepted this. This was no problem for an ancient reader to accept. But we live in a different age now, and many people are reading that as basically they literally lived that long. And, well, it's not one person, it's a clan identity. Yes, there was a real person behind it, a real clan progenitor, but not one that's living continuously for that entire span of time. Clan MacDonald? Okay. Well, there's a Scottish clan, for example, called Clan Donald. It's been around for 900 years. Its progenitor was basically had the surname of Donald. Also, MacDonald comes from that as one of the clades of that clan. It's been around for 900 years. It has a clan presence that goes over, as I said, nearly millennia. And there are several clans that do, Scottish clans that do this. So you do have these instances of this in not just, as I said, not just in Israelite clan society, but also in other clan societies as well. Now, your second question, which is very different. I mean, wow, you change gears quickly here. How is the resurrection of the dead supposed to work? Are only some resurrected? My opinion is everyone is resurrected. Okay? Some are given a body in that is in the image of Christ. The others are given bodies in their own image. And that was just one of those things that everyone gets resurrected. Everyone gets resurrected. This is a separation of the sheep and the goats. Okay? The sheep get bodies of blessing. You know, we are meant to be embodied beings. We're not spirits supposed to be floating around. We're supposed to have, God created us to have bodily integrity and unity. If we are just a spirit with no resurrection, we're still dead. We're still dead. Because we are separated from ourselves. We have no cohesion or unity without a body. So we are still dead at that point. So when we get our new bodies, that is a reunification of body and spirit. And that is part of being alive. Spiritually, and in the terms of, say, life as it existed before the fall. Likewise, those who are, say, are going to be resurrected to judgment will also receive a body. Okay? They will also basically fit for where their new life will be, or new death will be. Their everlasting judgment. Okay? But it's a body that's going to be fit for that eternity. They're not condemned and frankly, this is an act of mercy. To be honest, this is an act of mercy, because to be a spirit with no bodily presence for all eternity would have no cause, no agency, no, and I do think there's agency in the afterlife. I do think there's agency in the afterlife, but they would have no agency. They would just be nothing but voiceless spirits. So I think there is definitely going to be a resurrection of the dead for the believer and unbeliever alike. So everyone gets a body. Some of their bodies, some bodies will be, resurrected so that they enjoy holiness in the form of bliss. Some will be resurrected to experience holiness as pain and fear and trauma. But even that is a bigger mercy than just leaving them as disembodied spirits for all eternity. Because then at least they have some agency at that point. So I can get into the whole agency thing on that at some other point. But basically, you can still, be a crummy person in the afterlife if that's where your disposition lies. But it's going to be suffering to do that. So anyway, I hope that explained my position on this. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Addison Weir for $4.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Did you see the trailer for the new Indiana Jones movie? If so, what are your thoughts? Are you excited to see the movie? Oh, I have not seen the trailer. The last movie was just so bad. Oh, I don't have high hopes. I do not have high hopes for this. Not at all. Oh, it was so awful. The last Indiana Jones. I kind of wish they had stopped. I'd be really, really happy if they didn't make this film. Because I don't trust them to make it good. Okay? Indiana Jones is one of those franchises that's just getting worse and worse and worse over time. The whole Crystal Skull thing was just, so bad. So bad. So no, I'm not excited to see the movie. I've only got fear and trembling with regards to this film. But I did hear about it. In fact, I only heard about the trailer today. I haven't actually seen it yet. But, maybe hit me up next week. I might have seen it by then. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay. Bible Exegete for $10, 10 Romanian. Thank you very much for the super chat. That's good to see you here tonight. In what city did Pharaoh's daughter find Moses? That would be at the city of Avaris. Okay. Now, what exactly is going on here? And I think this is really, really important because there's a whole lot of explanation here that sort of the Bible doesn't quite cover here, and some cultural background. Now, there were women in ancient Egypt had almost an uncontested right, which was that a woman in Egypt could adopt upon her own prerogative. She did not have to ask her husband. She did not have to ask her father. She could adopt a child on her own prerogative. This was a woman's right in ancient Egypt. The only women that did not have the right to adopt were slave women and the daughters of the king. Okay, this creates a problem for the biblical text. We got to recognize this. Is that Pharaoh's daughter, under normal circumstances, would not have had the right to adopt because she'd be bringing somebody, a potential security risk, into the royal court. Okay. So, what's going on here? What's going on here is that Pharaoh's daughter is a retrojective term. She's not Pharaoh's daughter at the time she adopted Moses. She's daughter of the vizier. It's when Moses returns that everyone finds out that his mother was the daughter of the Pharaoh. And that's very important. Because at the time when Moses was adopted, the Israelites the king did not live at Avaris. He lived in Thebes. The king lived in Thebes with his royal court, his harem, and all his daughters and sons. Okay? So that's hundreds of miles away from where the Israelites lived at the city of Avaris. But the vizier of Lower Egypt happened to live in the palace at Avaris. And his daughter could have adopted Moses. Now, who was this vizier? This vizier happened to be General Ramses, who became Ramses the First. So, it's his daughter who, while she was still not daughter of the king, had the right to adopt and exercised that right. And this is the only way, essentially, that the daughter of a king could adopt on her own prerogative, was if she was not yet daughter of the king. And we know that General Ramses had his land holdings in that region of Avaris, the land of Goshen. So, that would have taken place at the city of Avaris. And Avaris was on the south bank of the Pelusiac branch of the Nile. There's lots of reeds there, lots of papyrus reeds. That's also another clue too, is that you go to, say, Thebes. There's very few papyrus there, very few papyrus, because papyrus grows in the marshy regions in the delta. So this would have had to take place in, say, a place where there was lots of reeds, and we know from all the identifications that would have been around the city of Avaris. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. It's a fascinating question because we get to sort of dig deep into all this historical detail, and I think it's one of the parts of the passage that's not well understood because the text does use retrojective identifications. And we have to understand the context here to really sort of get what's going on. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it, and I hope that helps. Ay, 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 ay. The Camilla part says the documentary Exodus Gods and Kings. Oh boy, that's bad. Seems to imply that Horemheb and Ramses I were the same person. No. They were colleagues. They were friends. They were very good friends. They were both generals. They both served in the army. Horemheb was the higher ranking general. Horemheb was basically made Ramses I the crown prince, his successor, while still alive. They were very good friends. They served on campaigns together. They were buddies. They were war buddies. So it was very interesting, the relationship between Horemheb and Ramses I. Very interesting relationship. But no, not the same person. Okay. Yeah, do not get your history from Exodus, Gods, and Kings. Never do that. All right, John Febeck for $9.99. Thank you very much for the super chat. Based on the geographic descriptions in Genesis 8 to 9, do you have any thoughts where the author thought Eden and the Garden of Eden were located? It seems both are somewhere in Mesopotamia, and hard to say for certain, but it does seem that way, yes. We do have identifications that do seem to point to it's sort of in the lower the more southern area of Mesopotamia. Now, the interesting thing about that area of Mesopotamia is that the water level has actually, unlike most river deltas, where the land sort of stretches out, grows over time into the ocean. The opposite has occurred in Mesopotamia, where the ocean has sort of moved in, eating up the delta area of Mesopotamia. So unfortunately, we're probably not going to be able to do any excavations in that area where the Garden of Eden might have been, if we just rely on the identification markers in Genesis 8:14, 8 to 14. Now, the only thing, I mean, we do know that it talks about the Euphrates and the Tigris, and we know where those rivers are. It also talks about one, I think was the Tihon. Here, look up Genesis. I think it's 2. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, the one we don't know is the Pishon. It flows the whole land of Havilah where there's gold. The second river is the Gihon. This is in Genesis 2:13. Flows around the whole land of Cush, and that's a bad translation. Cush is a bad translation here. It should be Kish. Okay, this is the Masoretes playing with our text. The Masoretes, unfortunately, I'll just bring up the Bible here so that everyone can see it. And I was just reading here from verse 13. The land of Kish. And we do know Kish from Mesopotamian records. Unfortunately, the Masoretes in the 10th century AD put the wrong vowel pointings here. So, and it might not even be their fault. It might have even been the updating that happened, say, during the Iron Age. We do know that the Maters Lectionis were added, say, during the Middle Hebrew period to the Hebrew text. And not all of those are correct, even though they're consonants. We do have pre-Masoretic texts, but this is a Mater's vowel, so this would be this would even be pre-Qumran. So you're talking here a vowel that is. I can even highlight that vowel. Let's highlight that vowel so you can see exactly. Pull up the Hebrew here. All right, and highlight the vowel. This is the word kush here. It's this. This is the offending vowel right there, the one highlighted in blue. Okay. So it's likely that during the Iron Age, when they were updating all these vowels, because probably in the original text that vowel wasn't there, that they were not aware of Kish anymore, because Kish is a very ancient kingdom. It's a very, very ancient kingdom. So that vowel would have been added during the Iron Age. So that's definitely a later update to the text. So it's not part of the original text. So it's very likely that should have been Kish, not Kush. So this is why we don't always trust scribal updates, because scribal updates sometimes get them wrong, even if it makes sense from a consonantal point of view. So, so we got essentially 3 rivers here that are in Mesopotamia. The only one that remains, we don't have an identification for, but if we can sort of gather from the other 3 that we are dealing with a region here that is in Mesopotamia. So that's what I would think is most likely here, is we're dealing with a region in Mesopotamia. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to take a couple of super chats, and then I'm going to quickly, and then I'm going to call it a night, because I still have some editing. Non-super chats, sorry. Take a couple of non-super chats just to round out the live stream tonight, and then we're going to call it a night, because I still have editing to do, and then I have to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. So, so I'm just going to scan quickly here and just take a couple. And we're going to call it a night. Okay, I'll take this one here from Thomas Perez. What was the purpose of God stating that the years of man are 120 in Genesis 3:6? Basically, that's the countdown. Basically, it's not saying. I know there's two interpretations of this. One that says that the maximum lifespan of a man is 120. The other is that Noah has got 120 years to finish that ark, and then it's curtains on mankind. I think it's the latter of those 2 interpretations. That it's not that this is not talking about maximum lifespan. This is talking about, well, you've got 120 years to get your life in order, and then it's curtains. Mankind's going to get blotted. So that's what I think is the meaning here. So anyway, thank you for the question. Very much appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to take one more non-super chat, and then we're going to call it a night, because I've got a lot of work still to do. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take this one. Chow Yees. Wasn't it a cherubim that was placed at Edom? Yes, it was both. It was both a cherubim and seraphim. They were both there. Here's the thing. The cherubim are named. God says there was a cherubim, but also a flaming sword. Let's go pick the passage here, and we will explain this, tease this out here. Okay. This is 3. All right, and I'll pull up the Bible here. This is Genesis 3:24. So he drove the man out, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he stationed the cherubim and the flaming sword which turned in every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. Okay. So we've got 2 layers here of angelic beings. We've got because I mean, you see the artists try to say, okay, there's a cherubim, guy with wings, and he's holding a sword of flames. No, that's not what this is portraying. This is not portraying that. Okay? This is portraying that the outskirts of Eden are guarded by cherubim and a flaming sword that turned in every direction. And it's different than the cherubim. It's not the same being, which turned every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. So the tree of life is being guarded on all sides with extra protection. Those are seraphim. Seraphim are angels of fire. They're the fire angels. They're not named here. They're not named as seraphim. Okay? But they're being described. Okay? They're being described as a weapon, the flaming sword. And it's an inference by description. Now, if you see the descriptions of seraphim, they're represented as snakes that sort of spit out fire. They spit out fire in every direction. Every direction that's in front of them. Now, this is why you see, for example, on, say, the canopic shrine of King Tut, these cobras on the top, and they go all the way around the canopic shrine and they face outward. They never face inward. They're trying to keep impurity out by blasting a beam of fire out there. Think of this as like an ancient death ray. That's exactly what's being portrayed here, is an ancient death ray. So there's seraphim being posted around the tree of life to basically burn anyone who tries to get into it. So this is again, the purpose here is to tell you that there's seraphim here, but by description, not by name. So you don't confuse the seraphim with the Nakash, which is the fallen serpent, the devil. So the author here, presumably Moses, doesn't want you to be confused. So this is why he's using an analogy to describe the seraphim instead of just calling them seraphim. There's a real important purpose here, because it would be very, very easy to say, oh, the Nakash, seraph, same thing. God's just retaken the devil here and he's just putting him right around the tree. The author does not want you to be confused here, so he's using a different analogy. He's using an analogical language here to make sure that you can keep your spiritual being straight. So that's what's going on. You've got cherubim, seraphim, and the Nakash. Okay? And they're different. Now, Nakash was actually a cherubim. Okay? But cherubim are not the only ones in the garden either. Presumably, there was a lot of spiritual beings in the garden, or at least had access to it. So anyway, I hope that cleared this up. I want to thank you for the question, and we're going to call it a night at this point because I still got a lot of work ahead of me tonight. Anyway, I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. I want to thank all the super chatters because you do put food on our table, and we do very much appreciate that. I want to thank our Patreon supporters who help us upgrade our equipment and to repair the ones that break. We're thankful for that, and we really appreciate your support of our channel. I also want to thank our regular subscribers and who watch our videos and post comments. And I also want to remind everyone to join us Monday night for our premiere of the debate with my commentary. So with that said, I want to thank you all for watching. Have a great night, and I will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.